Best known for the song Inside Out, or as a lot of people refer to it as the Heart in a Blender song, Eve 6 were an anomaly, nabbing a major recording contract when they were just in their junior year of high school. But a changing music industry, burnout, and substance abuse led to the band calling it quits within half a decade. But they soon came back, with one of the members becoming the unofficial king of Twitter, and I'm not kidding you guys, interviewing a presidential assassin. Today, let's talk about the rise, fall, and rise again of Eve 6. Eve 6 would be formed in 1995 in La Crescenta, California. The group's origins begin with frontman and bassist Max Collins, guitarist Jon Siebels, and a drummer named Nick Meyers. The band took shape in Max's freshman year at Crescenta Valley High School when he met guitarist Jon Siebels in physical education class. Their influences included punk rock like Jawbreaker, pop punk like Green Day, all the way to Tom Petty, Elvis Costello, Pixies, CCR, and Built to Spill. The band first went by the moniker Yaku and then 11teen, which was the name they had when they actually got signed, until they finally chose Eve 6 just before they put out their debut record. Eve 6 would be inspired by an episode of the popular sci-fi show The X-Files. For the members, it became a ritual to watch The X-Files when they were in the studio taking a break on their first album. Max Collins would tell the World Herald, "Remember the cloning episode? Eve 6 was on the plaque above a door to a padded cell that held the Psycho Dude." Getting back to their early days, the trio made the decision not to tour and not play popular clubs in LA and Orange County. Instead, they opted for coffee shops and backyard parties, with Siebels telling an interviewer, "We kind of stayed away from doing the clubs a whole lot because a lot of the Hollywood clubs have the whole selling tickets to play thing. That's just like the worst. To feel like you're handing over money to play somewhere, we'd much rather pack out a coffee house and have a great time than to have the high stress of selling tickets." Some of Eve 6's early gigs saw them play at Eagle Coffee Pub, the Natural Fudge Company, and Cobalt Cafe. It was at a show at Cobalt Cafe that the trio caught the attention of an A&R woman who worked for an Orange County punk label named Dr. Dream Records. She liked the band and invited them to meet the label reps. Collins would remark in one interview that the label was where members of seminal Orange County punk bands went to die. But since they were 16 to 17 years old and being offered a label deal so young, they couldn't pass it up, and so they signed with them. Eve 6 soon began recording with producer Steve Soto of the Adolescents. During the tracking of the drums, the label would coordinate an interview with a syndicated college radio program called Radio Asylum. A woman named Jennifer Harold would interview the band, and they did about 4 to 5 songs on the program. Harold really liked the group, and she had been working with the then RCA act 1000 Mona Lisas, and she knew an A&R guy from RCA named Brian Maloff. She sent the live recording of Eve 6's performance to Maloff, who liked what he heard. Eve 6 was soon playing a showcase for a few RCA reps, with Collins admitting the performance was pretty terrible. He recounted how their then drummer dropped his drumsticks mid-performance, but it didn't really matter. RCA ended up signing the trio to a deal when they were freshmen. That A&R man, Brian Maloff, who signed them, would tell an interviewer they were very influenced by Green Day and the Muffs. It was a little noisy punk rock band, but you don't write your best or most original songs at age 15. I thought if they were given some time to simmer and mature, they could write some very timely material in a few years. This was around 1996. The trio's RCA deal did come with a few stipulations, one of which was that the members had to finish high school before they were even allowed to record their debut record. The members were given weekly paycheck of about $95 each to work on their songs and play some more shows. The trio was basically left alone for nearly 2 years, and it wasn't uncommon for Collins and Siebels to question RCA's commitment to them. But it was in their senior year of high school that their A&R guy from RCA checked in on them, and he took them aside and gave them a pretty blunt assessment. Collins would recall to Stereogum what he said: "Yeah, I see you guys falling through the cracks. I don't think you've got the songs. I don't think you sound like anything that's happening right now." He's like, "I'm going to give you a little bit of money to get these songs off your chest." That felt so condescending. Collins and Siebels would graduate high school, but for Collins, It was literally the label deal that helped him graduate. He would recall to the New York Daily News, "My senior year, I got 4 Fs and a D. Luckily, we have a credit system for work experience. If you get paid, you get 10 credits, which are worth 2 classes. So Jon and I graduated because we were getting checks from RCA." Keep in mind, one of the songs the band played for that A&R guy was Inside Out, albeit not in a finished form. The song had a lot more fat on it, according to Collins. Then it was some point in 1996, 1997 that the group's drummer Nick Meyers left. It appeared to be musical differences based on some of their early interviews. Without a drummer, the band would soon hire producer Don Gilmore to work on some additional songs. Gilmore, up until this point, had engineered some pretty big records, but he hadn't produced anything hugely commercial. The members chose him because they loved one of the bands he worked with, which was the Cunninghams. It just so happened that celebrated producer Don was working at the same studio as Eve 6. The producer's son was drummer Tony Fagenson, who was already done high school, and he was enrolled at the University of Southern California. His father was handed Eve 6's audition tape, and he passed it on to his son. Tony was soon invited to audition, and he joined the band. With the addition of a new drummer, Eve 6's sound also underwent a change. Siebels would tell the Orlando Sentinel, "When we first started playing, all our music was very pop-punk influenced, just big loud power chords. Then as things went on, it started changing a bit. And our new sound has more pop. It still has that classic punk energy, even though it's not punk per se." Producer Don Gilmore would be especially crucial in helping reshape and refine their songs. He would take that song Inside Out, cut out about 25% of the lyrics, with it originally being a pretty long track. He would also help the trio develop the bridge of the song. When Eve 6 went back to their A&R guy, he liked what he heard, and he gave them some more money to do some additional songs. And that would lead to their first album, their 1998 self-titled record. As I mentioned before, by this point, the band were still calling themselves 11teen, but they made the decision to rename themselves Eve 6. Collins would tell the New York Daily News, "We didn't want to be like some Silverchair band," referring to the Australian band who got big when they were teens. "You're not going to be a teen forever," he would remark. Released in April of 1998, the band's self-titled debut record would be bolstered by the first single, Inside Out. Inside Out soon became a buzz clip on MTV, with it topping the alternative airplay charts for 4 non-consecutive weeks and peaking at number 28 on the Hot 100 chart. The Montreal Gazette that songwriters in 1998 were too afraid and guarded to wear their hearts on their sleeve. While they wouldn't name names, the paper would cite groups like Matchbox 20 and Third Eye Blind as possible references. Eve 6's self-titled record would go gold by late summer of 1998, eventually going platinum soon after. It would end up selling nearly 1.5 million copies, and Eve 6 had another successful single with the track Leech, which would peak at number 6 on the alternative airplay charts, as well as number 10 on the mainstream rock. Meanwhile, the track Open Road Song and Inside Out would appear on the soundtrack for the teen comedy Can't Hardly Wait. Collins would recall the inspiration behind their first record, telling Stereogum, "For that whole record, I was pretty much writing it at this one girl who cheated on me and broke my heart. My muse would have been that relationship and that girl, and not really having the emotional equipment to know how to deal with it." There would also be a few songs that were inspired by other things, like Tongue Tied, which deals with the subject matter of being labeled special, while Small Towns deals with Collins' view of the closed-mindedness of, well, small towns. Collins would also credit Jawbreaker for inspiring his lyrics on the album, telling Stereogum, "Jawbreaker lyrics sounded smart. I want it to sound smart, you know." Some of the reviews for their first album remarked how the band's music sounded quite mature given the members' age. The band would soon go from touring to recording their second record, 2000's Horoscope, which would be once again produced by Don Gilmore. The cover art, featuring a video game type character straight out of X-Men or something, may have been inspired, or at least been a tribute to the members' love of video games. Collins would refer to their second record as a standard tuning Duran Duran inspired pop record, while he told the Morning Call newspaper, "On the first record, we were overly conscious about not having too many elements so we could play them exactly live. On the second album, we want to take it a step further. We just kind of wanted to broaden stuff up a little bit, so put more synthesizers and put strings on more stuff. While Eve 6 tackled some more serious subject matter with tracks like On the Roof Again, which concerns a suicidal friend, they would do it in a more humorous way, with Collins telling Billboard magazine, "Songs you hear on the radio these days sound so serious to the point of pretension, so I tried to throw in a twist of fun this time." The lead single Promise would peak at number 3 on the Modern Rock Tracks chart. On the Roof Again made it to number 19 on the same chart. But then the album sort of stalled and kind of fell off a lot of people's radars by early 2001 and was considered a flop. But by the spring of 2001, things had changed. Horoscope would be rescued by MTV. The band's label would end up issuing the goodbye ballad Here's to the Night in early 2001, but it wasn't an instant hit. The members would speak to Newsday, revealing that MTV had to be pressured to play the song after sitting on it for several months. The members of Eve 6 would even appear on MTV's program Total Request Live in May of 2001. Carson Daly would proclaim Here's to the Night was going to be the song of the summer, and he was correct.
Here's to the nights we felt alive. Here's to the
It was soon after that appearance the song shot up the singles charts, and on the 1-year anniversary of Horoscope coming out, the record went gold. Soon enough, the trio started hearing stories of Here's to the Night being used at graduation ceremonies and proms. RCA Records senior vice president, meanwhile, would tell the same paper, "The week we took Here's to the Night to the radio in February of 2001, we sold 845 copies. It was definitely a dangerous situation, but we had such confidence in Here's to the Night." It soon became the most requested song on pop stations and re-entered the Billboard Hot 100 chart, peaking at number 30. The funny part is, Here's to the Night was also my grad song as well. Horoscope would go gold and shake off any idea that Eve 6 was a one-hit wonder. Eve 6 would take a few years off, with the members spending some time apart, enjoying life and letting the songs come more naturally than before. They would return in 2003 with their third record, It's All in Your Head. The album was considerably darker and mostly about loneliness and despair. Siebels would tell an interviewer, "I think sonically it's definitely different from our last record. We didn't use as many production elements like loops and synthesizers and stuff like that. We just wanted to make a record that had variety, and with each song having its own special little niche." Giving examples of more somber acoustic-based tracks like Hey Montana, to full-on rocking songs like Bring the Night On or Think Twice. Would tell an interviewer about the inspiration behind the whole record, revealing, "An old relationship and kind of growing up in general, observing life around me, and a new relationship." Released in July of 2003, the lead single Think Twice would peak at number 9 on the alternative airplay chart. But the record was a commercial disappointment. By 2003, the music business was changing. In just a few short years, record labels were merging, people who long championed the band were leaving the label or losing their jobs, and illegal downloading was now hurting record sales. Their third record would sell about 250,000 copies, about half of what its predecessor did. As the band hit the road, Collins was in the throes of alcohol addiction, and it was during a stopover in Pittsburgh he'd be arrested for indecent exposure at the hotel the band was staying at. He'd spend a couple nights in jail and ended up getting out early. It just so happened that one of the guard's daughters saw the show that night and helped expedite the process. Collins would grow increasingly miserable as he struggled with an undiagnosed anxiety disorder and battle alcoholism, which seemed to start sometime around 1999 and peaked with the band's tour for their third record. It was only made worse when Collins realized that the album wasn't doing well, with him recalling, "For a band like us that was really born of radio, that was a signifier. You sort of felt the momentum decreasing and the drinking continuing to increase. It was just miserable, and it was my call. I said, I just don't want to do this anymore." It was by 2004 Eve 6 called it quits, and RCA dropped the band. While getting dropped from the label wasn't the main reason for their breakup, Fagenson would admit that it was probably the last straw that broke the camel's back. The band was mentally and emotionally exhausted and felt like things happened for them so fast and so quickly that they didn't really have a chance to come to terms with it. Keep in mind, by the time Eve 6 broke up, the members were still really young, 24 and 25. In the aftermath of the breakup, Collins, who was financially well off, at least enough, spent time reading a lot of books and smoking cigarettes, while also continuing to drink, and worked on some new music with the group The Brotherhood of Lost Dogs. Then on Mother's Day in 2006, hungover and sick of what his life had become, he decided to get sober. He also started going to therapy, doing meditation, and started taking medication as well. Fagenson, meanwhile, got into producing and songwriting for other artists, while Siebels played in the group Monsters Are Waiting. Then it was around 2006, 2007, Collins and Fagenson started playing music once again, and they would form the group The Sugi Tap. And they also started writing for other musicians, including Puddle of Mudd. That eventually slowly led the way to Eve 6 reforming in 2007, minus Siebels, bringing guitarist Matt Baer. Collins and Fagenson realized how many Eve 6 fans there still were and how many new fans had discovered the band during their hiatus. Siebels' band Monsters Are Waiting were starting to make some noise, and he felt more committed to them and seeing how things turned out. But in 2011, Siebels rejoined Eve 6, and the band nabbed a recording deal with Fearless Records, releasing their long-awaited comeback album 2012 Speak in Code. The material on the album dated back to when Tony and Max reconnected, and some of the material was written in the months leading up to actually recording the record. They would once again enlist producer Don Gilmore, and they incorporated a lot more synthesizers, with the album having a charting single in Victoria, which peaked at number 25 on the alternative airplay chart. And would continue to tour, and in 2018, Fagenson left the group to pursue his new musical project titled Dead Posey, which he started with his wife. He would be replaced by Ben Hilzinger. Eve 6 would release their most recent LP in 2022, but in more recent years, Eve 6 has gained a reputation for having a pretty amusing Twitter account run by Collins. The first tweet that went viral happened when Collins admitted that he was a virgin when he wrote Inside Out. His other tweets included funny tour stories, or simply asking celebrities and musicians on the platform if they were fans of the Heart in the Blender song. Loudwire would even crown Collins the king of Twitter. The band has also become outspoken critics of Spotify for how they compensate artists, with one tweet saying that stealing music is more ethical than how Spotify operates. Collins would tell Fortune magazine that his band generates about 1.3 million streams each month, but most of the money goes to Sony, who owns the band's masters. Collins was also in the news recently because he interviewed John Hinckley Jr., the man who tried to assassinate President Ronald Reagan to impress Jodie Foster in the early 80s. Well, it turns out Hinckley Jr. has been trying to launch a music career and play some shows, but no venues have taken him up on the offer. Hinckley Jr. uses social media and sometimes publishes the artists that he's listening to, one of which was Eve 6. Eve 6 has most recently launched a Patreon page, which gives their supporters access to new songs. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.